Hey guys! I'm really excited for today's video because you know how much I love propagating, and today we're going to be comparing and testing which of these three substrates is the best to propagate in: soil, water, and sphagnum moss. Definitely leave a comment down below before you watch this video letting me know which one you think is going to perform the best. I just want to say, I know this isn't like a real experiment. Of course, there are a lot of different factors that can come into play, and it will definitely depend on like the plant type, the lighting they get. I only tested 5 of each plant in each substrate, so of course like you'd have to test with a lot more plants to get a more definitive answer. Just for funsies, we're gonna call it a science experiment. All right, let's just get into it. Okay, so to get set up for this little science experiment, I took 15 cuttings from 3 different types of plants. So 15 cuttings from Syngonium erythrophyllum, 15 from Peperomia orba, and 15 from good old golden pothos. And I did try to keep the cuttings consistent, so I tried to do the same amount of top cuts of each plant, and then also the same like node cut size to leaf size. So I did try to keep it consistent, but of course like leaves on plants do come in different shapes and sizes, so of course they're not exact. I'll be putting all of the plants into 3-ounce cups. For the soil and sphagnum, I did put 2 drainage holes into the bottom of each cup. To pot up the soil, I just fill the cup halfway with my favorite soil mix, don't compact it down. Then I put the node into the cup and fill up around it. Then for sphagnum moss, I've put a little bit of sphagnum down at the bottom of the cup. I wrap the roots up with a like clump of sphagnum, not too tightly. You definitely want it to have some airflow. If you do it too compact, that's how you end up with rot in the moss a lot of the times. So yeah, then I just stick it in the cup and that's that. And then for water, of course, I didn't put drainage holes at the bottom of the cups for obvious reasons. I just used tap water, nothing fancy, nothing added to it, and put each plant into the cup and filled it up with water so that the water was touching the nodes. Easy as that. And I will say that these will all be living in my IKEA cabinet under the same grow lights, the same distance from the grow lights. So they are in a pretty consistent environment. That is it for getting this whole thing set up. I will see you in a few weeks for the first update. Okay, so here we are with our first update. It's been 2 weeks since I put these plants into the substrates. So we'll start with sphagnum moss, and so far not much has changed. We do have a little bit of slight yellowing on a few of the plants. The Peperomia inflorescence died. Nothing really has rooted that I know of because I have been checking these and there are no roots showing through the sphagnum moss, unfortunately. And I will say I did have to water these one time. Since getting them potted up in here, I just added a little bit of water to this tray and they soaked up what they needed, and the sphagnum moss is, you know, doing its thing, staying damp. Now moving you up here to the soil, which is where I do actually have a little something to update you on. So if you can see back here, on these 2 Peperomia, we do have rot. The stem is completely gone on these plants, so I am actually going to completely take these out. This is a big reason. Obviously, I am a little bit biased when it comes to sphagnum moss and water propagation as opposed to soil propagation. Another reason I prefer sphagnum moss or water is you can see roots a little bit more easily than in soil. And again, a couple of the pothos are yellowing a bit. And then over here we have our water propagations. I have not had to water these yet or add water to these yet, but we are getting some roots on some of them. So let's see. So this Syngonium here does actually have some roots. None of the other ones have any roots yet, but it is exciting that that one already does. And then some of the Peperomia, they're very, very small, but I think you may be able to see that tiny little root there. They are beginning to root, and we don't have any rot happening yet here. Ooh, that one's getting pretty good roots. This is a definite perk of water propagation. You can see the root progress. All but 1 of the pothos, so 4 of the pothos do have some water roots coming in. This one has the most progress out of any of the plants we can see. Looking really good. So yeah, that is the 2-week update. Okay, we're back with a 6-week update. I was going to do a 4-week update, but then when I came to look at the plants, you couldn't really see any root growth in the sphagnum or soil substrates, just in the water. So there kind of wasn't a point to do an update, but we are back at 6 weeks with an actual update. And okay, they are being watered. As you can see in the sphagnum moss, there are some dead leaves. What matters in sphagnum, I'm actually just gonna go ahead and pull off the dead leaves. The only thing that really matters is that the node is intact, which they are. On screen, it's looking, on the camera, it's looking a little bit black, but it is still green and alive. Same with that one in there. This one's kind of buried further down, but that one is also green. So they're doing pretty well. I am pleased, although it is taking quite a bit longer to get new growth on these vining plants, the syngonium and the pothos, than I was expecting. But the peperomia are growing really, really well. We are actually seeing some yellowing on the bottom leaves, and I actually think that's because they do have pretty, like you can see, they have pretty substantial root growth. It would be time to introduce nutrients, which this is, once you start seeing root growth, is the point that I would start giving them liquid earth or plant food of some sort of nutrients. I mean, look at those roots. It is definitely time. I know that sphagnum moss does have some sort of nutrient pH thing, I don't know, but not enough to keep them going. And I am noticing they have developed these new root systems. I am having to water them quite a bit more frequently, so I'm probably to the point where I'm having to water them every 5-ish days as opposed to every week and a half before there were root systems, because they are just taking in so much more water. But yeah, they're doing really well. Here we are to the soil. So let's see if we can find any roots. Can't see any there. Obviously this is a, oh, and there are some, again, dead leaves up here as well, but you can see the node is, oh, there's no root on that, but there is a growth point. So that's kind of unfortunate, but at least there's a growth point. One of the perks of, or one of the cons of soil is you can't see as well what is going on. Although look, look you guys, we have root. This is a top cut, and top cuts tend to work faster or better, like overall from all the propagations. There really are not, I'm not seeing too many. Oh, look at that. These peperomia are killing it in all of the substrates. So, I mean, we can see some roots, but in like these plants, I'm in all of the rest of them, I'm really seeing, oh, look right there in the golden pothos, there are some roots. So, I mean, like stuff is happening. It just seems like it's happening a lot more slowly here. Okay, and then water, of course, we are having root growth. Here is a dead leaf. So far we do have dead leaves in all of the substrates. Throw that aside, but the roots are looking really awesome. Look at the peperomia, although I will say the peperomia in the water propagations aren't as voluptuous as in the soil or the sphagnum moss. The actual plants themselves are pretty small. The root systems look great, and I do think it's because there's just not nutrients in the water. Like I said, once you get to the point where there is growth or root growth in the water is when you would need to start adding nutrients, but I'm not doing that just for the sake of the video experiment, if you will. Just keep that in mind that that's something you would have to do. But we do have growth on all of the plants. Top growth for the syngonium, killing it. I'm like really surprised by how little like new growth point growth we're having on all of the plants. Even in water, I mean, I guess, oh, that's also a top cut. Even in water, I don't know, just overall, like I'm kind of surprised the plants aren't growing more in all of the substrates. A little bit surprised to see that the sphagnum moss seems to be producing, especially on the peperomia, the most robust growth. Although, I mean, we are seeing growth on the soil as well. So I don't know, let's see what's going on. This is a top cut. I'm not seeing any roots there, but there is a new leaf. Oh, there are roots on that one. Why aren't you pushing out a growth point? I definitely thought that by 6 weeks there would be more growth points. I do think that having the plants in a more humid environment does help with the growth point, as well as adding nutrients to the plant substrate. So, I mean, soil, obviously we wouldn't have to do that, but there are still not really like, not a lot of growth happening here. Kind of shocking. I don't know. But yeah, that is the 6-week update. I will be back in 2 weeks, taking everything out of the cups and comparing the root systems. See you in 2 weeks. Here we are going to clean off the roots from all the substrates. So here we have our soil props, the Peperomia orba. The dirt was really difficult to wash off of the orba plants because you can see the roots are quite delicate and hair-like. That's why they look a little bit messy. They really cling to that soil even after washing them off. Here we have our golden pothos cuttings and the Syngonium erythrophyllum cuttings, which these roots were a lot easier to wash off in the soil. Next up, we have our sphagnum moss, and I am honestly not even going to attempt to remove the sphagnum moss from the orba roots because they are so fine, and sphagnum really clings to the root systems, making it super easy to, tear the root systems apart if you try to remove all the sphagnum moss from them. So yeah, it is easier on these thicker roots to remove it, but it is definitely still hazardous because, as you will see, I did end up accidentally tearing the roots off of 2 of my cuttings, which I am so mad at myself for. 2 of my golden pothos cuttings, you can see here. Oops. But yeah, we are going to be keeping the roots just for comparison purposes because that was totally just my bad. Oopsie. But it happens. And then the Syngonium cuttings. So yeah, here they are. And then of course the water props, which are definitely the easiest to clean off, although I did end up with 2 plants that had these slimy, kind of rotten roots, but for the most part they are definitely easier to keep clean, so just a little note there. Here we go, comparing all of our Peperomia orba cuttings. So top row we have sphagnum moss, middle row we have the soil props, which of course we lost 2 of them in this process, and then bottom row is water, and you can just kind of compare the root systems there. Here's kind of a cluster view to see how much like foliage growth they got. So yeah, to me it looks like the sphagnum moss ones performed the best. The soil ones performed the worst, simply because we ended up with 2 that were rotten, so of course it doesn't look as thick. Yeah, from this view I definitely say sphagnum moss looks the best. Okay, so moving on to golden pothos. Top row is the sphagnum moss props with, again, the 2 that I accidentally tore the roots off of, but you can see the roots look pretty awesome on the sphagnum props. The middle row is soil. The roots look pretty good here too, but definitely not as long or established. And then bottom is water, which clearly the water roots look the best, although they have less secondary root growth than sphagnum moss or soil props. So sphagnum moss probably had the best secondary root growth. Water just kind of resulted in these long, swirly, single roots. And here we have our cluster views. So definitely, in my opinion, the water props look the best by far in both their foliar growth and then also root growth. Last up, we have our Syngonium erythrophyllum cuttings to compare. So top row, once again, is sphagnum moss. We ended up with 3 cuttings without any root growth or really like foliage growth either, which was kind of shocking to me. Middle row is the soil growth, which again, we have 3 cuttings that also didn't result in any kind of growth really. A little bit of axillary bud growth, but that's it. And then bottom row is water, which again, I think performed the best. It's kind of hard to say, but in all of the substrates, we did have difficulty propagating these, which is kind of shocking to me because Syngonium are my top favorite plants to propagate. So I don't know what was going on. And then here we go with our like cluster side-by-side comparison. So by far, the water looks the best. I would probably say that the sphagnum moss was the worst and soil not far behind that, but by far water was the best because we ended up with less foliage rot, which isn't a big deal. I usually remove foliage anyway, but yeah, that's just what it is. Okay, and then here we go, cluster comparing all of the plants side by side. So top row, we have all the soil propagations, middle row, we have all of the water, and then bottom row, we have all of the sphagnum moss. And overall, I definitely think that the water propagations by far looked the best overall, and I don't really think that that's a surprise. We did end up with a few that have like kind of slimy, beginning to rot roots, but they're definitely not like dead, and there was still hope for them. I do think sphagnum moss would be my next favorite, especially for plants that have finer root systems like the peperomia varieties. I mean, I think the soil and sphagnum are like pretty close to one another in how well they performed, but let me know what you think. I'm really interested to hear what you think of these comparisons or this whole like experiment thing I did. I don't know. What do you think overall? I just want to know your opinion. That is it for this video. Let me know what you thought of this if you like this kind of content. I hope you found this video helpful or entertaining. It was really fun for me to make. It took me over 2 months to do, so I hope you like it. Please leave a comment if you liked it so that you know it was worth it. But if not, that's okay too. But that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one.